All right, this is part 2 of the Playhouse build. I snapped my chalk line, so now I gotta fix that. I'm just a DIYer who has no idea what he's doing, but I have power tools and the internet, so why not give it a shot? The next thing I needed to do was cut out rafters. That took a little bit of research on understanding bird's mouth cuts, rise over run, and roof pitch. Once I got that figured out, it was just a matter of coming up with a pattern rafter and then tracing it out on the other 2x4s that I used for the rest of the rafters and cutting them out. I found a pretty cool technique on TikTok in order to get the ridge board up into place using only the end rafters. And much to my surprise, it worked pretty well. Yes. So well, in fact, everything was level and you can hear my excitement.
Hell yeah.
This is what I was talking about in the last video, how there's actually a big open space here on the side where I should have been prepared to put siding, but because I kind of cut it prematurely, I ended up having to just piece it together towards the end. Once all the rafters were set in place, I actually felt pretty good about this one. After a long day of working on the roof, I decided to switch gears and start working on a ladder to the loft. I was pretty content with it because it was just an idea I came up with on the fly, and it looked pretty decent. Once the pieces of the ladder were completely cut out, I started putting some deck boards on the loft, which were left over from my wood pile. Throughout this project, as much as possible, I tried to use as much wood as I had left over or recycle as much as I could just to prevent having to go buy more. And it actually worked out pretty well. Once the ladder was in place, the cloud started rolling in, so it was time to cover it up, and I picked it up the next day. Once again, my vision for this project was to have dormers, and not only have I never built a playhouse before, I have never even thought about touching a dormer. So it took a lot of research. There's not a whole lot out there that explains a dormer of this size. It's so small and minuscule. It was actually pretty difficult to come up with the dimensions, but I made it work and learned a lot about angles. Oh, come on! And here comes the inspector.
It's not going how I wanted it to.
And it looks like it's time for another inspection.
Surprise, I know. Hey, the inspector.
Got your permit, son? Got your permit, son?
The nice thing about doing this dormer was because it's symmetrical to where the other one was going to go, it was just a matter of copying the exact same dimensions for the second one.
Well, they're not even to start, so that's good. Good job, Sam.
Retard. Because I had just got done installing the roof, there was a lot of similarities to a gable roof on the dormers. So it was just kind of like a mini roof. That wave is just a desperate attempt to make my neighbors think I'm not crazy.
Waiting for the promise of the risen. Lay your words in mercy's hands. Bridges built with just a thank you.
Just like on the gable roof that I had just installed, the roofs that cover the dormers were very similar. Requires a ridge beam and some rafters, just a smaller size. What was also convenient was putting up the second dormer was just a matter of matching the same dimensions as the first, just to keep everything symmetrical.
Okay.
One thing that I did not consider was adding a little bit of wiggle room for the rough opening for the windows. When I ended up installing the windows, it was a pretty tight fit. I made it work, but it was ugly. Here you can see where I ended up having to jigsaw a couple pieces of siding together to get that triangle put in place. It's not pretty, but it works. I ended up just sealing it up with some silicone later. I also had to install some ladder rakes to give a little bit of covering or protection over the edge on the sides. I also didn't take into consideration needing subfascia, so I ended up just doing a 1x6, which I regret now. But you know what? It's just a Playhouse. It was a lesson learned, and no one's going to care anyways. What I'm doing here is having to trace out and make small cuts so that the sheathing will wrap around the dormer. Instead of installing the sheathing first and then just cutting out a hole for the dormer, I'm having to puzzle piece this together, and it was a pain in the butt trying to get these pieces right and getting this sheathing to properly cover the rafter portion. It took so long, in fact, I ran out of tape and didn't even get to film the middle portion.
What do you think?
But as you can tell, the kids don't seem to mind. They don't seem to care. It's just a Playhouse. The next day, with the sheathing installed, it was a matter of finishing up the dormers, throwing some sheathing on top of those rafters, and completing that portion of the roof. Yes, even on these dormers, I put 1x6s for the subfascia, and trying to install those into the ridge beam was a pain. I regret doing it this way. I know there are plenty of other ways, but you know what? Again, lesson learned. Something I took away for the next project. This was the part of the day where I was starting to lose it.
Okay, let's try this again. Which one do you want?
But I still had to remember, when the kids want to help, it's always worth stopping and letting them help, even if it takes longer than necessary. That's it for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3.